India's digital economy runs on data, and behind that data is a new generation of infrastructure leaders. My guest today on the interview is building the backbone of India's cloud and AI ambitions. Sunil Gupta is the co-founder, MD and CEO of Yotta Infrastructure, one of India's fastest growing hyperscalers data center platforms. As India races to become a global digital powerhouse, we ask him, is our data infrastructure ready for the future or not? Sunil, great to have you today on ET Now. Thank you so much for your time. I want to first talk about the big picture. India's consumption is exploding as we know it. Are we building data centers fast enough, or are we already behind the curve?
From a stage where industry was just about 200 megawatt in 2016-17 to a stage where we are 1.4 gigawatt today, which is 7 times. This is a story of last 7 years itself. So I would say it is a phenomenal progress. India has been able to catch up because the need of digitization for enabling 1.4 billion people, of course, is very, very large, much larger compared to any other economy which has got much lesser population. But having said that, if we simply go by the numbers, how much megawatt of data center India has compared to the population, under this metric, India has, let's say, 1.4 gigawatt for 1.4 billion people, while for a country like US, which has got 350 million people, the data center capacity is about 17 gigawatts. So if we simply do the maths, India is still about 1/50th of what a US is. India is still about 1/5 of what a China is. So still a lot of ground to catch up. A lot of built out has happened. A lot of built out is going to come in the market in the next 3 years. But with AI coming in the mix, the equations are continuously changing. We were all projecting that India will become about 3 gigawatt by 2030, and that'll be a good achievement. But with all the latest projections with AI coming in, looks like India will be requiring, and India should be having at least 6 gigawatt by 2030 or 2032. So it's a lot of catching up despite great work done so far.
Right. So Sunil, how does India's data center capacity today compare with US, with Europe and China? And where are we still falling short?
As I said that if we purely go by the demand tailwinds are very, very clear, and I think they are very, very visible to anybody to see. If India has got 1.4 billion, a country like US has got 350 million people. So we are 4 times more people, and nobody can deny that India is as much digitally enabled today, maybe more compared to even an economy like US. You know, we all are so habitual of using our mobile every second minute, and we are so habitual of creating and consuming content all the time. UPI has done such a great magic. And if we see, while 2 years back AI was not there at all in India, but what the developments of the last 2 years have happened, lot of sovereign models on local data sets are getting created, and I'm sure many of these models will get launched in the upcoming AI Impact Summit. And many of the use cases across agriculture or education or healthcare or climate, which are citizen facing, will be coming out, and that will be further adding up to the the consumption of digital. So demand side, India will always be far, far, far bigger compared to anywhere else in the world. The key point is, how do we build out the capacity to meet this far higher demand which India has compared to any other country? So naturally, the infrastructure also which India need to make, whether it is pure data center, the physical building, or whether it is the compute on the top of that, whether it is a CPU compute or a GPU compute, need to be as much bigger. As I said, a lot of work has been done, but a lot of catching up has to be done. India will have to continue to build, I would say, for next 10 years, more and more data center capacity, more and more compute and GPU capacity to catch up with its own demand. And of course, if India has aspirations, which India has, for not only serving its own AI requirement, but also the AI requirement for rest of the world, the capacity build out has to happen without any restrictions for next 10 years at least.
Right. Sunil, like you rightly said, with AI workloads surging now, how different are AI-ready data centers from traditional ones?
AI runs on special type of chips called GPUs, and these chips, if I talk in a very simple language, they are much, much more powerful, let's say 100 or 1000 times more powerful than a standard CPU chips which are running in our regular servers, which are running our regular application like a core banking or a SAP or Oracle or an e-commerce application. When the chip is 100 times more powerful, it is but natural the chip will be consuming lots of power for it to operate, and with consume more power it will generate a lot of heat, so naturally it means the amount of cooling required just to cool this chip also will be as much high. And this is the special reason that the data centers which host the chips are supposed to be having much higher power densities, much higher cooling densities, and the overall size and scale of power and cooling in this building is supposed to be 10 times higher or 15 times higher, 20 times higher than the what the traditional building which India has been building or anywhere else we have been building. Just to give you an example, traditional data center used to have a rack unit, where the equipment is kept, which was having a power of, let's say, 6 kilowatt per rack. Uh, AI rack, which is hosting the GPUs, will be having a power like 120 kilowatt per rack, and in coming time, it may become about 250 kilowatt per rack. So you're talking about 20 to 50 times more power in the same rack footprint compared to what the data center was running. This requires a very, very specialized type of data center re-engineering. You are no more talking about cooling the chips through air cooling mechanisms, which we all were doing for last 25 years. You are actually doing something called liquid cooling. You are actually taking water or specialized liquids right up to the rack, terminating them right on the chips, the chip GPUs itself, so that the heat generated is extracted right from there. So these are special impacts coming in. Very, very difficult so many times to retrofit a existing previously built data center into an AI data center. Some people are able to do that. I am also able to do that because of many various reasons. But the data centers of tomorrow, which will be purpose built for AI, will be very, very different. We typically call them AI factories. They'll be extremely power dense, and they all will be cooled with liquid cooling.
Right. Sunil, when we talk about, so much infrastructure being laid when it comes to data, it's important to talk about power and sustainability as well, because data centers are power hungry. Can India scale digital infrastructure without hurting its climate goals?
This is something like saying that do we need metros? Because construction of a metro in a city like Mumbai may also result into some cutting of trees or impacting environment in a limited way. Uh, we actually do not count, or I'm sure we also count the lots of benefits, including environmental benefits, will be getting because the vehicular pollution will get reduced because when the mass transportation comes into the lives of people. Same is the case with AI. AI is going to bring in direct benefits into so many facets of our life, improving the agricultural produce of our farmers, ensuring rural education through self-learning through our own pace, ensuring healthcare through precision medicine, ensuring climate, better monitoring and better changes, ensuring, I would say, any and every sector of life, because of the way AI is that machine is developing the code, you are not coding the machine. Practically any and every facet of life is not remaining untouched from AI, and that is a positive side of AI, which is also benefiting the environment as much as it is also, let's say, damaging the environment by consuming lots of power and cooling. So having said that, the measures, the mitigating steps have to be taken because AI chips will consume lots of power, and that is where I would say globally there is a initiatives, and that is where India is taking, I would say, the bigger lead because we started scaling AI and scaling data centers and now AI, let's say, later than US. So naturally we had the lead in terms of that we can adopt latest technologies, we can learn from the experiences of others. So to just to give you a few points, what we as DC operators across India are doing is, number one, there are two things which matter. Number one, uh, what is the amount of power you are using? Can you optimize that? Number two, what is the quality of power? What is the type of power you're using? Instead of thermal power, coal-based power, can you use green power? In the first case, the amount of power, it depends on two things. One is the chip which you are using is more efficient? Is it using less power for producing the same amount of tokens? This is the job which is lying with people like Nvidia or Intel or AMD who are making the chips, and they are on to this job for last 4 years. Every new chip, for example, which Nvidia is bringing is far more power efficient. It is generating much more tokens for the same amount of power or same amount of dollars. So that is what Nvidia and people like that are doing. As DC operators, what we are doing is that the amount of power which goes into cooling these chips is supposed to be reduced significantly, and that is where we are bringing in technologies like liquid cooling. As far as the which type of power you are using, that is where I think India has got a great advantage, thanks to we being closer to equator, thanks to we having a tropical atmosphere, tropical weather. uh, India has the inherent advantage of being blessed with lots of wind and lots of sun, and that is why India today, out of the total installed capacity of about 500 gigawatt in India, uh, more than 47 or 48% of that power actually is green power. And the CAGR of green power produced in the coming 5 years is going to be much faster than the CAGR of the traditional thermal power. So that is the case on a broad level, that India is actually generating far more green power than anywhere else in the world. So in data centers, what we are doing is that by default, you talk to any industry player, at least 30-35% of the power every industry player is using is a green power, which can be a mix of a solar or a wind, or a or you can say a hydro or a biogas or whatever. As Yotta, because we have put GPUs on a very large scale, our response increased much bigger. My data center in Navi Mumbai, for example, where most of the GPUs are, is 80% fed by green sources. My data center in Greater Noida near Delhi is actually 100% fed by green sources. You can just see that how I would say we as DC operators are taking it responsibly. Besides my teams which are working on AI technologies and cloud technologies, I have a dedicated team which is only responsible for sourcing power. We have long-term contract with hydropower sources, with wind power sources and solar power sources, and we are ensuring that we constantly keep on increasing the green in our mix. So how do we reduce the amount of power we are using, and how do we use more and more green power? That is how industry is responding to this challenge.
Right. It's also important, Sunil, to talk about cost and competitiveness. What makes India an attractive or expensive destination for global hyperscalers?
First of all, that India has always been the largest market for any and every digital player, whether it is Amazon or Azure or Google, or the businesses which are running on the top of that, which is like YouTube or any of the SaaS services, like or for that matter, social media like a Facebook or Instagram or whatever, right? We all know that more than 30-40% of the users on all these platforms are actually Indians. On ChatGPT, by the way, Indians have already become the largest number of users. So India is always the largest or second largest market for all these e-commerce or social media or digital players. So if people have to serve this large demand, which is pure India based demand, that itself justifies hyperscalers and various local players to build out in India, right? Whether or not we also serve the demand, which is not Indian demand, but the demand of other countries being served from India, is a, you can say, top up or icing on the cake. But right now, the Indian demand itself is far higher than what India's capacity can serve today. Now, coming to why, about 15 years back, you all used to have a phenomena where while India was still creating lot of data, creating or consuming, but majority of the data center capacity was still outside. Indian website used to be hosted in US or Europe or Singapore. The reason the change has happened and majority of that content now is actually getting hosted in India increasingly, one is obviously the data localization piece, the DPDP Act, and that has actually made many people, for example, RBI has mandated all the financial data has to be hosted in India. There are other sector specific regulations in healthcare, for example. That is one thing which has helped big time. Second is the infrastructure has evolved. 15 years back we could not think of creating large data centers within 18 months of period, getting land allocations, getting all the approvals, getting the power connections, right? Getting a very solid fiber connectivity to our data center so that the connectivity, the is not lost out when the users try to access data center. So in terms of, and then by the way, if you will see in the last 7 or 8 years, multiple state governments have come out with data center policies. They have understood, they are attracting, in fact there is a competition between various state governments to attract data center players to the state, because they have understood the direct and indirect impact on the economy and employment of data centers. So because of all this multiplicity of factors, building data centers and doing data center and cloud business in India has become far more easier than what it was 15 years back. That is one part. Second is in terms of cost, India scores heavily. Whether you see the cost of the land, underlying land on which you build data center, or you take the cost of constructing the data center physical core and shell, or for that matter, you take the cost of putting in the MEP equipment, what you call as the power or cooling and related equipment in data center. All these elements, India is much cheaper compared to most of the developed economy in the world. Just to give you an idea, the cost of building a data center in India generally is touted as around 5 million to $6 million per megawatt of IT load. That is the typical number you will take in the industry. The same cost, if you take it for a US or a UAE or a Saudi or a Japan or a Korea, that is around 12 to $14 million. So India actually turns out to be almost 50% of the cost compared to this most of the other economies, and that also shows, beside many other benefits, as I said, that India itself is the largest market. So naturally, people, for low latency purposes and to give the best experience to users, they would rather like to host in India. So both from the user experience point of view and also from the point of view of that fundamental structural issues have been resolved, and the cost also is very less. India is fantastic and very attractive destination for anybody to build data centers and clouds in India, whether to serve Indian market or serving the global market.
Right. I also want to talk about tier 2 and tier 3 cities here. Will the next wave of data centers come from metros or smaller cities closer to users?
Again, this is a question which we all as industry are talking about and deliberating about for maybe last so many years. Uh, I would say even when the use case maturity comes, and the use case maturity for a tier 2 or tier 3 data centers would be 5G, IoT, and AI working together to enable use cases which require real-time decision making. For example, a connected car. For example, let's say streaming of live videos, right, or live gaming, right. And there can be many other use cases across industries which demand a complete real-time intelligent response going back to the user, and that is where you will need AI to be running in at the edge into the data center at a city level, and that processing of AI into a city level data center will go through a 5G high speed network to the user's device or whatever sensor they are using. So that use cases are today, while we all have talked about those use cases, but those use cases are yet to mature. When those use cases start maturing, that is the time you will find a lot of demand for tier 2 and tier 3 data centers, and they will maybe small, it may be just about a 250 kilowatt data center, a 2 megawatt data center, but there will be a proliferation of that. Today, because those use cases, while they exist, they have not matured to a level that you can commit your business to that. None of the data center players, except for few instances here and there, are doing some serious play of tier 2 and tier 3 data centers. And we are serving across India demand or the global demand from some concentrated data center, you can say blocks, whether it is a Navi Mumbai ecosystem in Mumbai, or whether it is a Noida, Greater Noida ecosystem in near Delhi, or whether it is outskirts of Bangalore, outskirts of Chennai, and of course now, Telangana, Hyderabad has come up, and Vizag is being developed. So these are still concentrated pockets, because in these pockets you can have gigawatts of data center capacity. The power has been sorted out, the fiber has been sorted out, many other benefits have been given by the state, but you are actually serving the whole of the country through these concentrated pockets. The day those use cases become real production use cases and scale comes into those use cases which demand real-time microsecond response, you will start seeing the proliferation of tier 2 and tier 3. But I think we are still some time away from the tier 2 and tier 3 data centers. Today, still the concentration of data center is still the center data center into these 6 or 7 cities.
Sunil, it's also important to talk about security and trust. In an age of cyber threats, how do you convince global clients that India is a safe data hub?
This is like whether you talk about India or whether you talk about any other country. Ultimately, it is less of a physical location. It is because every security threat is less of a physical threat. It's more of a cyber threat. Cyber threat, can come whether you are, your data is physically present in India or anywhere else in the world. So what matters there is what type of tools you are using, what type of practices and processes you're using, and what type of people skill set you're using, so that you can effectively prevent any type of cyber attacks which may come in. If you are digitally growing, if you are hosting critical data, whether when I'm saying you, which means the customers who are hosting it anywhere in the world, it is but natural there will be counter actors who will try to attack you, and they will try to take advantage of what you are trying to do. They will try to damage your business or reputation. So as I said, India, because we all are known as the skill set capital of the world, we have got no shortage of technical talent, and that also applies to cybersecurity, right? So today, if you see any data center operator in the country who also is offering, let's say, cloud services, and on the top of that, managed service like cybersecurity services, Yotta is one of them, and there are others. We are ensuring that we are putting the right set of people, we are ensuring the right set of air gap solutions to our customers, so that one customer's data cannot be seen by other customer or from outsider. We are putting the right type of practices into that, and of course we are putting right type of technologies on the top of that. There is all these things sometimes get reflected by way of, are you certified, right? And that is where many of the global certification, whether you call it a PCI DSS certification or a 27001 certification, 2717, 2718, there is a SOC 2, there is a SOC 3. People like Yotta, people like others who are very serious in this space actually are not only putting in all these tools, practices, processes, but they also are ensuring they're going for all these certifications. And these certifications are the ones which are giving a lot of conviction to global customers that if we are going to this operator, they are following, doing all the right things to protect their data and to protect their business. And India is absolutely on par with the world as far as this particular angle is concerned.
So it's also important to talk about Yotta's edge. What sets Yotta apart in an increasingly crowded data center and cloud ecosystem?
As you know that we are a latecomer. We started in 2019, right? And that is something which gives you disadvantage, but that also gives a huge advantage as well, right? You have learned from everybody else. You have learned from your own experiences of the past, and you can do something new. One of the fundamental, I would say, right thing which Yotta has done, which has made us distinct from others, is that we are seeing tomorrow. We are seeing far, far ahead tomorrow compared to possibly which others are not looking at. When we started Yotta, our that time India was still building, we were still growing, that we have to start building a little larger data center because hyperscalers are coming in. We envisioned Yotta as a hyperscale data center campus company, right? So we started with a campus story that if a customer comes to you, he would like to grow along with you for next 25 years. It means you should be able to provision data center space and power and fiber and everything which goes with it for our customers for the next 25 years. It means your campus has to be scalable. You should be able to build large number of data center in a same piece of land. You should have a huge amount of power upfront. You should have your own substations, fiber. We did that proactively when nobody in the market was talking about. Today it has become standard. Everybody is talking about campuses. One, we repeated the same thing when we envisaged a sovereign cloud. If you see that uh, 90% of the cloud market in India has been captured by hyperscalers like Amazon or Google, right? Nobody in 2019 was actually talking about that, no, because of the geopolitical reasons and for many other reasons. It can be cost effectiveness. We should have India's own sovereign cloud. At that time, it was like, why are you talking about it? Today, because of the various geopolitical movements which we see day in and day out, I think this has become so very visible to everybody that India should have its own control on its technological infrastructure. It should be able to define its own technological destiny. This is something become so very clear today. It was not clear in 2019. So we started building our sovereign cloud in 2019. It has taken us 3 or 4 years. But because we did that step, today we are able to run very, very large cloud services, especially for government, which is very, very sensitive towards hosting their mission critical data on sovereign cloud. So this was, again, I would say, we possibly could see what was coming. Same thing I can apply to when 2 years back, when we decided to go very, very big on NVIDIA GPUs. When ChatGPT got popular, AI got into every consumer's hand. At that time, there was a big narrative in the whole country. Industry bodies were talking about, Prime Minister office was talking about, METI was talking about it, that while India has got skill sets, India has got data sets, India has got a huge IT software services ecosystem. What India does not have to become an AI leader is compute. We thought at that time that we have data centers, we have power, we have fiber, we know how to run clouds. It is a very logical complementary thing for us to go very big into GPU compute, because that is the thing which India will need maybe 1 year down the line. And while it was a very risky decision at that time because the stakes were getting into hundreds of millions of dollars, but today, if we are able to take like a 70% or more market share today into this whole AI GPU infrastructure, because that is the call we took much earlier than anybody else took. So I would say, while you are doing your day-to-day business and scaling it up, which is obviously important, how you constantly keep an eye on what is going to come in the future and actually start working on that, start investing into R&Ds and innovations. I would say the real edge of Yotta is that.
Right. Sunil, thank you so much for your time today. It was lovely chatting with you and so much insight on India's digital infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Really nice talking to you. Thank you.